So in my last video, I introduced a concept called radical acceptance, and I wanted to go deeper into that to make it a little bit more accessible or easier to apply. And then we're going to take it a step further with something called alternate rebellion. So what exactly is radical acceptance? Radical acceptance is the idea of fully acknowledging reality as it is, without resistance or judgment. This means accepting painful events, difficult emotions, and even things we may not be able to change. It's not about resignation or giving up. It's about freeing yourself from that endless loop of what ifs and if onlys that can get us really stuck. It can also free us from thinking we can fix or change other people, important people in our life, people that impact us positively, negatively, people that we're emotionally attuned to or connected with. And that's really helpful because it also improves our relationships. Radical acceptance can be transformative for our mental and our physical well-being. When we resist reality, thinking things shouldn't be this way or should be something else, we keep ourselves in a heightened stress response. This keeps the amygdala, the brain's fear center, on high alert, which increases cortisol and leaves us in a state of anxiety, or as some psychologists term it, that fight or flight response. We're always ready to respond to threat. It just makes our reactions a lot less mindful. We can think of it in the comparison of action and reaction. So in that state, we're much more likely to react as opposed to act. So when we act, there's a thought process behind it. There's a pause between that stimulus response, and we're choosing our behavior and our reactions, our words, etc. But a reaction is something that is much more unintentional. Kind of like a knee-jerk reaction. I think most people would understand that analogy. So when we practice radical acceptance, we allow the parasympathetic nervous system to activate, signaling directly to our body that we're safe. We give ourselves permission to feel our emotions without trying to push them away, which can calm our nervous system and allow us to respond to challenges with more clarity, like how I described an action as opposed to a reaction. Like there's a thought process behind it. We choose our response. It's a choice. So today I wanted to provide a little bit of guidance on how one of the ways we can practice radical acceptance. So I've written up 5 steps. I mean, this is just me and my brain, and there are many other ways that we can explore radical acceptance in our lives, but anyway, here we go. So we're acknowledging reality without judgment, and this is so tricky. Like, it sounds really simple, but it's not. We're hardwired to make judgments. We're hardwired to assess a situation it reduces our cognitive load. So it makes us much more efficient in our everyday life. Judging and assessing things and making conclusions is not inherently bad or good. It just is something that we do. On the contrary to that, radical acceptance is about not labeling something as good or bad. It's about seeing things as they are without assigning a value or a judgment to them. So in step 1, you can start by simply acknowledging what's happening in your life right now. Or if you're feeling a particular way about something, you can, I suppose, choose where you want to focus on for this exercise. So start by acknowledging that feeling or that life event or just how your life is right now. And then you can notice if your mind is judging the situation or labeling it as good or bad. And then after you go through that process of noticing where your mind is going and how you're judging the situation, you might say to yourself something like, this is the reality of the situation right now. And then we reach step 2, which is allowing yourself to feel fully. Often we try to avoid or suppress difficult emotions or feelings. Radical acceptance invites us to feel them instead. Whether it's sadness, anger, or fear, let yourself experience these emotions. This can reduce the need to escape or avoid, which brings a sense of calm and grounding. This also may have a flow-on effect of reducing the need to engage in some of our less healthy coping strategies. Then we move to step 3, which is observe without trying to fix. It's really natural to want to fix or change things, but sometimes that isn't possible. Radical acceptance asks us to step back and observe rather than rushing in to change things. You can say to yourself, I don't need to solve this right now. I can simply observe it or be with it or notice it. Over time, this practice can ease our stress response and allow us to find a more peaceful perspective. But it also strengthens that muscle, that space between stimulus response, that pause. It strengthens that part of our brain that's responsible for making that choice. The choice to act instead of just react. Step 4 is practice self-compassion. There may be a few eye rolls here. I get it. But self-compassion is actually a crucial part of radical acceptance. So remind yourself that it's okay to feel pain and that struggling doesn't mean you're failing. Offering yourself grace and kindness during challenging times is really healing and it's really important. I think a lot of us struggle with self-compassion. I definitely do, so I totally get it. I am quite hard on myself. The way I've kind of flipped this to make it more applicable to me is understanding that I'm actually not that important in the scheme of things. And I'm never going to be perfect because I'm not a god. It sounds so weird, but it just kind of takes the edge off existing. You don't have to be perfect because you know you're never going to be perfect because you're really not that great. You're just a person that cares and loves for other humans and wants to live a happy, fulfilling life like everyone else. And you're really not that different to anyone else. You're really not that amazing. And just lay off yourself, you know? I know that sounds really wonky and weird, but it's kind of like surrendering a little bit, surrendering your ego a little bit. Yeah, like I can care for myself the way I care for others, because this high expectation of being perfect is just so ridiculous, because I'm a very, very imperfect human being. I don't know. I know it sounds wonky, but someone's out there might be able to relate to that. It is funny. Now there is a step 5, but this one is kind of like a take it or leave it. Some people find mantras really helpful because they're kind of an easy thing to remember and recite, or they're a bit, it has that spiritual aspect to it, or, whatever it is. Some people find mantras really helpful, some people don't. So totally, this one is a take it or leave it. But you could create your own mantra around acceptance. It's kind of like, it kind of acts as a cue. Mantras are kind of a cueing. They cue you to enter that space of acceptance. So if that's something that you say every time you practice, or outwardly, openly, what's the better word for that? Overtly practice radical acceptance. If you use a particular mantra, it can actually cue you to enter that state more quickly. I mean, that's a whole nother area of brain activation. But anyway, for example, like you could try phrases like, I accept things as they are, and just repeating that. Or, you can create your own, which can feel more relatable to people. Repeating a mantra does have the function of reminding you to return to acceptance. I may actually elaborate on that at some point. Anyway. And the same rule applies here. What you practice gets stronger. This is true for our brains and our muscles and our skills. So the more you practice radical acceptance, the easier it is, the more intuitive it becomes. Now, I want to pair this with something called alternate rebellion. The science gets really interesting here. Studies have shown that both prosocial behaviours and rebellious behaviours can arise from very similar areas in the brain, like the nucleus accumbens and the medial prefrontal cortex. The nucleus accumbens is involved in reward seeking, which means that we're naturally drawn to actions that feel rewarding. The MPFC, on the other hand, plays a role in self-regulation and social perspective taking. When we think about rebellion, we often associate it with risky or impulsive acts. However, research suggests that people who are fun-seeking, those who pursue enjoyment and spontaneity, may also be more likely to develop prosocial positive behaviours. So, alternate rebellion can allow us to redirect our fun-seeking drive into meaningful acts. Instead of just acting out for the sake of it, or to avoid something or escape something. Alternate rebellion is a way to go against the grain in a positive way, in an intentional way. It's a rebellion not against people, but against norms or expectations. Now, I'm taking some special time to mention this because I love this concept so much. I'm going to provide a few examples, and then I'm sure that you could come up with your own examples of rebellion. It's really fun. For example, how much more socially accepted is it to criticize yourself than it is to practice self-compassion or accept your talents and skills? How many of us find it a bit awkward when someone compliments us about something? So in this way, I like to look at practicing self-compassion instead of self-criticism as alternate rebellion. In a culture that often promotes self-criticism, being kind to yourself is a rebellious act. Practicing self-compassion, acknowledging your own needs and struggles, but also acknowledging your unique skills and talents, challenges the belief that you have to be hard on yourself to be a success, or that it's undesirable to be confident and secure in who you are. And a side note to that, self-compassion does lower cortisol levels, but it also activates the insular and anterior cingulate cortex, which are brain regions that are related to empathy, self-soothing, and pro-social behavior. So when we practice self-compassion, we are more able to practice compassion for others, which helps us reinforce positive pro-social behaviors and the neural pathways that support this. Now I'm just going to add one other example at this stage, and it's one that I find really fun. It's breaking the rules. So you could do this exercise or divides your own, but you could write down some personal rules that feel restrictive and break them. Our brains are wired to seek rewards, especially when we do something novel or unexpected. So breaking rules is often seen by the brain as an act of novelty. This sense of doing something different or getting away with something can trigger the brain's reward pathway, releasing dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter. And breaking rules can often involve overcoming fear of judgment, fear of failure, or fear of stepping outside of our comfort zone. When we successfully break a rule without facing the anticipated negative consequences, the brain releases dopamine as a positive reinforcement, helping us feel more relaxed and validated in our decision and happier. I feel like I need to reinforce something here. We're talking about breaking rules that are not going to hurt or harm anyone. So I'm going to provide an example before I go. So you may have a personal rule. This is a really vague kind of overgeneralized example. Like, I have to work hard to be worthy, for example. And you would rebel against that rule, break that rule, by saying something like, I'm worthy of rest and joy, but also acting on that, like, doing something playful or fun for no reason. That's kind of like what I'm talking about. But you can also have fun with this. Like, for example, there are social expectations and rules that we abide by, like appropriate dress codes for stuff. So you could turn up to the grocery store fully dolled up and looking totally gorgeous like you're going to a wedding. That is a form of alternate rebellion, and it actually it's fun and it makes our brains happy. doing something silly activates our brain's reward system. It releases dopamine and serotonin. It's so good. I think the two bits here is silly and unexpected. Our brains like that. So if you found this interesting, please like and subscribe, or don't. Live your life. I don't mind. But I enjoy making these informative videos about psychology, and I hope you enjoy listening to them. Bye.